Day 38 of the war. Let's take you through of this latest ultimatum that has now been issued by the President of the United States of America. There you can see on your screens as far as what has been the issues that have dominated in the last 24 hours alone. And he seems to have an epic meltdown over the biggest choke point in the raging West Asia war, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Now, on Easter Sunday, President Trump has now set a new deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or he has warned that if Iran does not agree to the terms, then the US will unleash hell upon Iran. The deadline that expires on 6:30 a.m. on Wednesday, Indian Standard Time, which is IST, and Iran has now sharply hit back at President Trump's fresh threats to strike power plants and bridges, with a senior minister now calling the United States president to be an unstable and a delusional figure. Tehran has also dismissed Washington's warnings over the Strait of Hormuz, insisting that the waterway remains closed to the enemies of Iran.
ترامپ یک شخصیت متزلزل، متوهم با مجموعه تناقضات هست. جامعه ایران معمولاً به حرفهای ترامپ اعتنایی نمی کند، چون باور دارد که ایشان فاقد تعادل شخصیتی و رفتاری و کلامی است و هر لحظه با یک موضوع متناقضی مواجه میشه. به نظر میسه که ترامپ به یک پدیده‌ای تبدیل شده است که نه ایرانی‌ها، امریکایی‌ها هم قدرت تحلیلش این شخصیت رو ندارند و راجع به بحث تنگه برای جهانیان باز هست ولی برای دشمنان ایران بسته.
Well, in that expletive-laden truth social post that President Trump had issued in his latest warning on Easter Sunday, well, that seems to be the very point of escalation, especially when it comes to attacking civilian infrastructure inside Iran, including bridges and power plants as well, because the Strait of Hormuz, Mayank, good morning. President Trump has said if it is not reopened by his stated deadline, then Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one in Iran, because he says there will be nothing like it. Open the Strait of Hormuz or you will be living in hell. Just watch.
And I'm just wondering about the deadline, which is supposed to end on Wednesday, 6:30 a.m. IST. Because now again this 48-hour deadline, before that a 10-day deadline, before that 5-day deadline, before that there was a 2-day deadline. And in this case, I mean, lots of mayhem and destruction is taking place, which way we talk about, whether it's Middle East or it's Iran. And bridge, as we said, and then further infrastructures which might, going to impinge with the daily functioning of the common people. And if we remember that when water desalination plants were hit, it was seen as a major escalation. So we have to see which way are the things going to move, and also President Trump has to make statements in coming time, which is supposed to decide the direction of the war further. So whatever it is happening, and the way the missiles are being fired from Iran side on both UAE and Bahrain and even in Israel, so things are not shaping well. And now we also talk of Bab el-Mandeb also. So ultimately the people and all across the globe, the common man will be suffering because of this. But there's no end to the kind of deadlines which have been talked about and which have been given time and again and changed time and again.
Yes, that seems to be the contentious issue there, because there have been so many deadlines that has been issued. Then we need to put that in perspective exactly for our viewers as well, because there has been a lot of back and forth as far as President Donald Trump is concerned. So let's get you a basic understanding, when it comes to these series of deadlines that he had given in the past to the current one, which is expected to expire in 48 hours if Iran does not agree to the terms and conditions set by the President of the United States. So let's take a look. Is it escalation or is it desperation? On the 3rd of March, he says that the US will escort vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. And this seems to be, as far as his statement is now concerned, because he had said and talked about the US Navy to escort the vessels through the Strait of Hormuz because they were not willing to risk crossing the Strait of Hormuz amid if they come under attack, which Iran has very much also done the same. Then, some days later, on the 15th of March, he shrugged responsibility, saying that it is not my problem. The countries, because when he urged an appeal to to them to join in the efforts of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. They did not, extend as far as their support to President Trump's request or appeal is concerned. Then President Trump left it to themselves, saying the allies must join the efforts. And however, then on the 17th of March, he says, well, US ships don't transit from the Strait of Hormuz, then why should we be bothered? US doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz. This is what President Trump had said. Then it seems that the Strait of Hormuz, the blockade and the dominance that Iran has been exuding on that very narrow passage, this seems to have bothered President Trump. Because later, 21st of March, he says, open the Strait of Hormuz in 48 hours or else. And then he gives an address to the nation. 23rd of March, he says that the strikes has been postponed for 5 days. This was the initial postponement that he had announced, saying that in a way, certain levels of talks that have been happening because the world did, have a sigh of relief on that. Then that deadline was extended to today, which is the 6th of April, what we are now looking at. However, there seems to be a fresh deadline because now President Trump says that time is running out. Hell will be unleashed on Iran if it does not agree to the stated terms and conditions. And now what happened yesterday on Easter Sunday? Well, I cannot, read out exactly what President Trump said, but this is what he said, that open the Strait of Hormuz or I'm going to blow it up. And this deadline now what we are looking at, because tomorrow morning Indian Standard Time, which is the 7th of April, 6:30 in the morning is when this deadline is going to end. Now, in the meantime, let's talk about ceasefire or hellfire. A crucial diplomatic push is now underway to halt the raging West Asia war, because reports suggest that the US and Iran and regional mediators are discussing the terms for a 45-day ceasefire as a pause that is now seen as a last-ditch effort to prevent further escalation, because this proposed truce would act as the first phase of a broader plan that seems to be aimed at negotiating a permanent end to the conflict. Now, sources say that mediators are racing against time with intense back-channel talks that seems to be focused on de-escalation and reopening of the critical routes, including the Strait of Hormuz. However, chances of a quick breakthrough remain slim as the strikes continue on the ground, and the message is clear. Diplomacy is making the last push, but without a deal, the region could slide from ceasefire to full-scale hellfire. Well, Mayank, this is a concern there because soon what we are now looking at, as far as this conflict seems to be now almost reaching a 2-month deadline. If it does, then the situation today is being witnessed is going to be very different from the coming 2 to 3 weeks, which President Trump had highlighted.
One good thing which I can see, or the way I look at it, is that there are talks of diplomatic initiatives, and at least, but one thing which we saw in between was name of Pakistan also came up, and Iran had denied and had came out of the talk, which it said the conditions which were coming about were not as per its requirement. So in that case, at least happy thing is that there is a talk of diplomacy, because India has also been talking of the same and recommending that there should be talks in between the people, and there has to be a midway found by the all sides. And the way the destruction is taking place, the way the encompassing of the whole world and suffrage of people in terms of fuel and energy, and now talk of Bab el-Mandeb also getting engrossed into it, the things are really shaping bad. And again, the way the operations took place yesterday, there's a major destruction which has taken place as far as the equipment is concerned from the US side. It is playing games with the minds of the people and the commanders who are in the operations. So at least this 45-day talk now which has come up, and even if it is a proposal, it is a welcome proposal.